A paralyzed Apache woman is shoved into a cold river by the family she trusted. A lone mountain man finds her half-drowned and drags her back to life. It should have been the end of the story. Instead, the town watches a different version. Edited tapes, staged sympathy, and a brutal ambush that leaves a witness shaken. Now the woman fights for her voice, while strangers whisper she made it all up. The mountain man has a past that scares the town, and someone is hiding evidence in the dark. Who will stand when the only proof is a damaged body and a single saved recording? Will truth win, or will her family bury it forever? The morning light crept over the desert hills, painting the stucco walls of Maya's home in soft amber. She stood at her kitchen window, leaning heavily on her hand-carved wooden cane, and watched the sun rise over the family compound. The low-slung house had been her sanctuary for 42 years, its thick adobe walls keeping the merciless desert heat at bay, while holding countless memories within their earthen embrace. Through the window, she could see the small courtyard, where her old blue pickup truck rested against the weathered hitching post, its faded paint telling stories of countless supply runs and quiet journeys across the reservation. Wind chimes, lovingly crafted from copper pipes and smooth desert stones collected during walks with her grandmother, tinkled softly in the morning breeze, creating a melody that soothed her soul. Her herb garden, a cherished collection of terracotta pots arranged in neat, accessible rows, waited patiently for her daily attention, the plants reaching toward the early light. Maya reached for a small clay bowl on the counter, her movements careful and measured, each motion planned with deliberate intention. Her left side responded more slowly these days, a constant reminder of the attack that had left her partially paralyzed years ago. A night she tried not to dwell on, but could never truly forget. She pulled out her grandmother's medicine bundle from its special shelf, pinching dried sage between her fingers, feeling the brittle leaves crumble slightly against her skin. "Mother Earth, hear my prayer," she whispered in Apache, lighting the sage with a wooden match. "Grandmother Estella, guide my steps today as you always have." The words flowed naturally in her native tongue, connecting her to ancestors long past. In English, she added softly, "I miss you every day, more than words can say." The fragrant smoke curled around her face like a protective veil, and memories flooded back with unexpected clarity, splashing in the cool river with her cousins on summer days that seemed to last forever. Grandmother Estella watching from the sandy bank, her eyes crinkled with laughter as she taught them the names of plants in both Apache and English. The water had been so cool, so welcoming, a blessed relief from the Arizona heat. Those days of innocence and belonging seemed as distant now as the stars. Maya shook off the memory with a slight tilt of her head and turned her attention to her kitchen, where everything had its place in her carefully ordered world. Special grips on her utensils for her weaker hand, a sliding board near the sink for moving heavy pots safely, and carefully arranged shelves at reachable heights made independence possible in a world that often assumed she needed help. She checked her leather-bound notebook, where she kept meticulous lists of daily tasks and family gathering preparations, running her finger down today's entries with determination. A car door slammed outside, the sound sharp against the morning quiet. Maya looked up to see Lori striding purposefully across the courtyard in a flowing new dress that must have cost more than Maya spent on clothes in a year, her designer heels clicking against the packed earth with each confident step. Two cousins, James and Robert, followed in her wake like faithful shadows, their expressions a mixture of boredom and anticipation. "Maya, dear," Aunt Estella called out, hurrying through the front door without knocking, as if the concept of privacy was optional for family. Her smile was wide, but didn't reach her eyes, which remained calculating and cold. "We're here to help with the preparations. Isn't that thoughtful of us?" "I have everything under control," Maya said quietly, steadying herself against the counter, her knuckles whitening slightly with the pressure. "The schedule is all worked out." Laurie's laugh tinkled like broken glass in the peaceful kitchen. "Oh, you and your need to control everything." She ran a manicured finger along the windowsill, inspecting it for dust with obvious disapproval. "Such drama, always insisting on doing things yourself in this old house. The property could be put to better use, you know. So much wasted potential here." The cousins exchanged knowing smirks that made Maya's stomach tighten. James leaned against the doorframe with feigned casualness, while Robert picked up a ceremonial rattle, a sacred family heirloom, and twirled it carelessly between his fingers as if it were a toy. "Put that down," Maya said firmly, her voice low but carrying the authority that came from decades of protecting what mattered. "It's not for playing." Now, Aunt Estella chirped, clapping her hands together like someone addressing children. "Let's focus on the gathering. Such a lovely day for family to come together. We have so much to discuss." The hours crept by in a tension-filled dance of preparation and forced politeness. Maya felt the weight of their presence in her sacred space, each suggestion and critique chipping away at her sense of peace. As twilight approached, casting long purple shadows across the courtyard, Maya stepped out to tend her herbs, welcoming the excuse to escape the suffocating atmosphere inside her once tranquil home. She was reaching for an empty terracotta pot, planning to transplant some struggling sage, when Laurie's voice drifted from around the corner of the house, pitched low but crystal clear in the evening air that carried sound across the desert. "It has to look natural," Laurie whispered urgently, intensity making her words sharp despite their softness. "Like an accident. No one can suspect anything different." "But what if—" James started, his voice uncertain, nervous in a way Maya had never heard before. "No what-ifs," Laurie hissed, cutting him off with venom. "Just do exactly what we discussed. Everything depends on this going smoothly." Maya's hand froze on the pot, her cane pressing hard into the dirt beneath her as her body tensed with sudden fear. The wind chimes above rang out a discordant warning as a gust swept through the courtyard, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, a lonely, haunting sound that seemed to echo the danger hanging in the air around her home. Maya made her way to the communal kitchen, her steps measured against the uneven floor. Each footfall required careful consideration, a skill she'd mastered since the accident. The old wood stove crackled and popped, sending waves of comforting warmth through the room, along with the rich, mouth-watering aroma of rabbit stew and roasted juniper berries. Steam rose in delicate curls from the cast iron pot, carrying the scent of herbs that had been gathered by her own hands from the hillside. Her grandmother's recipes, passed down through whispered instructions on chilly mornings, were now being served on the dented tin plates that clinked and scraped against the worn wooden table as family members settled in, their faces illuminated by the dancing glow of oil lamps. "Finally joining us?" Laurie's voice cut through the domestic sounds like a cold blade. She sat with perfect posture at the head of the table, Grandmother Estella's old place, wearing a cream-colored blouse that seemed too pristine for the rustic setting. Her manicured fingers tapped impatiently against the tabletop. Maya lowered herself carefully into a chair, wincing slightly as her hip protested the movement. She positioned her handcrafted pine cane against the table's edge, making sure it was within easy reach. "The stew needs stirring every 15 minutes. You know that. Otherwise, the rabbit toughens." She kept her voice neutral, refusing to betray how much it bothered her to see Laurie in grandmother's chair. "Oh, always the expert on tradition." Laurie's smile was sharp enough to cut glass, her eyes never quite matching the upward curve of her lips. She cleared her throat dramatically, tapping her spoon against her plate for attention, like a queen summoning her subjects. "Since we're all here, I think it's time for a family council. About the inheritance." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The room grew still. Even the fire seemed to pause its crackling, as though the house itself held its breath. Shadows stretched across worried faces, and nervous fingers fidgeted with napkins and utensils. "There's nothing to discuss," Maya said quietly, serving herself a small portion of stew, the savory liquid pooling around chunks of tender meat and wild vegetables. Grandmother Estella's wishes were clear. She focused on the simple act of filling her plate, refusing to acknowledge the tension crackling between them like static electricity. James leaned forward, his elbows on either side of his untouched plate, his broad shoulders hunched intimidatingly. The overhead light caught the silver at his temples. "Come on, cousin. We all know what's best here. You can barely manage." "I manage fine." Maya's voice remained steady as still water, though her hip throbbed with familiar tension. She felt the weight of every eye on her face, searching for signs of weakness or surrender. She gave them none, keeping her expression as composed as the surface of the small pond behind the house at dawn. "Do you?" Laurie's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose in exaggerated disbelief. "Living alone out here, so far from proper care? The nearest doctor is 40 miles away. We're worried about you, dear." Her tone dripped with false sweetness, like honey laced with something bitter. She reached across the table to pat Maya's hand in a gesture that felt more like ownership than comfort. Robert shifted his chair closer to Maya's left side, the wooden legs scraping loudly against the floor. The smell of his cologne, too strong and artificial for this place, invaded Maya's space. "It's not safe. A woman in your condition all alone in these hills. Anything could happen." His words carried a subtle threat beneath their concern. "Maya," Aunt Estella wrung her hands, her voice pitched high with theatrical concern, her silver bangles jangling with each nervous movement. "You're so fragile now. Remember last winter when you fell? If the delivery man hadn't found you on the porch?" She let the sentence trail off ominously, her eyes darting to Laurie for approval. The lantern on the table flickered as a draft swept through the room, momentarily plunging half the faces into darkness. Maya felt her cane slide away from her grip. Robert's boot had knocked it under the table, sending it skittering across the uneven floorboards until it came to rest just beyond her reach. Not an accident, she was certain. His face remained impassive, but a tiny muscle twitched at the corner of his mouth. A memory flashed into Maya's mind, vivid as yesterday. Grandmother Estella's weathered hands gripping her shoulders, her dark eyes intense with the wisdom of decades, the smell of sage and cedar. "Never let them see fear, little one. Fear is what they want. Stand tall in your truth, even when your legs won't carry you." "I won't be bullied out of my home," Maya said, her voice carrying over the rising murmurs of protest. The words emerged stronger than she'd expected, resonating with the certainty that lived in her bones. Her fingers curled into fists beneath the table. Laurie slammed her palm on the table, making the silverware jump and sending ripples across the surface of the stew in Maya's bowl. "Bullied? We're trying to help you. You're being ridiculous and selfish. This affects all of us." Her carefully constructed mask slipped, revealing the raw greed beneath. "The property needs proper management," James added, his voice rising to match Laurie's. His chair squeaked as he pushed it back from the table. "You can't even walk down to the river anymore. How can you tend to this land? You have no right." Maya started to push herself up from the table, but her hip seized with pain so intense it momentarily darkened her vision. She gripped the edge of the table, fighting to keep her face neutral. No, right? Lori stood now, color high in her cheeks, her perfectly styled hair catching the lamplight. We have every right. This land should be shared, developed, used for something productive instead of just sitting here like a museum to the past. Grandmother Estella isn't here anymore, Lori shouted, spittle flying from her lips. She's gone, and we have to be practical now. Maya gripped the table edge and stood, ignoring the fiery pain shooting down her leg. Her palm found the smooth wood surface where generations of her family had taken their meals. She turned toward the back door, needing air that wasn't poisoned with their greed. We're done here. Oh no, we're not. Robert grabbed her jacket sleeve, his fingers digging into the fabric with unnecessary force. His aftershave enveloped her, cloying and artificial. Maya twisted away, but James was there too, reaching for her other arm with fingers that looked eager to leave bruises. She saw Lori's face harden into something cruel and unfamiliar in the wavering lantern light. A predator closing in on weakened prey. A hard shove came from behind. Who, she couldn't tell, but the force sent her stumbling backward through the open door. The cool night air rushed past her face, carrying the scent of sage and juniper. Her foot hit the wet earth of the path that sloped dangerously down toward the river, slick from the afternoon rain. For one suspended moment, she felt herself falling, arms windmilling helplessly, the dark water below waiting to swallow her whole. The distant sound of the rushing current seemed to call her name with hungry anticipation. The world tilted sideways as Maya plunged down the muddy bank. Her cane snapped against a rock with a sharp crack that echoed through the gathering dark. The sound of rushing water grew louder, drowning out the shouts from above. Cold hit her like a physical blow. River water filled her mouth, silty and bitter. She gasped, choking on mud and autumn-chilled current. Her jacket pulled her down, waterlogged wool dragging at her shoulders. Float on your back, little one. Grandmother Estella's voice, clear as yesterday. The river knows its children. Maya tried to turn herself, but her weakened left side betrayed her. The current spun her, branches scraping her face. She hummed broken pieces of a childhood song between desperate gasps, the one about desert rain bringing life back to dry places. Upstream, Eli Mercer checked the small windmill that powered his cabin's water pump. Wind rattled the metal vanes as dusk settled over the ridge. His old border collie's scent still clung to the canvas jacket he wore, though Jake had been gone 2 seasons now. The familiar ache of absence pressed against his chest as he secured the tarpaulin over his trap pile. A sound cut through the wind, something between a cry and a gasp. Eli went still, listening. 20 years of search and rescue work had taught him the difference between animal and human distress. Another choked sound. Without hesitation, he dropped the coil of rope he'd been holding and grabbed his crampons from the truck bed. The medkit stayed strapped to his belt, always, habit from too many years seeing trouble come without warning. Maya's head went under again. River water roared in her ears, but a deeper memory surfaced. Breathe with the current, Maya. Fight only when you must. She kicked hard with her good leg, breaking the surface long enough to pull in air. Eli ran down the ridge, boots sliding on loose shale. Branches whipped his face as he crashed through scrub oak. The river sound grew louder, and with it came the unmistakable thrashing of someone in trouble. The current dragged Maya under a low-hanging branch. Panic flared as leaves brushed her face. She grabbed blindly, fingers scraping bark, but couldn't hold on. Her grandmother's voice came again. Panic drowns faster than water. Maya forced herself to stop fighting for just one moment, letting the river lift her. Eli saw her then, a dark shape tumbling in the current. He shed his jacket in 3 quick movements and plunged into the water. The cold stole his breath, but training took over. 3 strong strokes brought him alongside the struggling figure. Maya felt hands grab her hair, then her shirt. Shame burned through her terror. Someone was seeing her helpless, broken. But as strong arms dragged her toward the bank, relief overwhelmed everything else. Her first breath on solid ground was ragged, river water streaming from her mouth. Eli's hands were steady, checking her pulse, turning her on her side. The night had deepened around them, stars pricking through the purple dusk. Maya coughed, shivering violently, but she was alive. Air had never tasted so sweet. Maya woke to the crackle of a wood stove and unfamiliar shadows dancing on log walls. Her body ached, each breath a reminder of last night's struggle in the river. She lay on a rough wooden floor, wrapped in a thick wool blanket that smelled of cedar. Someone had fashioned a makeshift brace from split wood to keep her legs stable. The cabin was a single room, rustic but meticulously organized. Wet socks hung by the pot-bellied stove, steam rising in lazy curls. A row of carved walking sticks rested on wooden pegs, their handles worn smooth from use. Mason jars lined crude shelves, filled with preserved fruits and vegetables. A narrow cot hugged one wall, its blankets military neat. Testing her limbs, Maya winced. Her left side felt heavier than usual, the familiar weakness amplified by the river's battering. Her wrist throbbed where she'd grabbed at branches. The privacy she guarded so carefully felt stripped away, leaving her exposed. Heavy boots scraped on a wooden ramp outside. Maya tensed as the door opened, revealing her rescuer, tall, weathered, with kind eyes that carried shadows of their own. "You're awake." His voice was quiet, matter-of-fact. "I'm Eli. You took quite a tumble in that river." Maya watched him move to the stove, where a kettle steamed. "I need to go." "Not yet." He poured hot water into a basin. "Need to clean those cuts first. Infection's no joke out here." His hands were gentle but clinical as he cleaned the scrapes on her arms. When she flinched, he paused. "Sorry. Been a while since I had a patient. Not since my EMT days." "You were a medic?" "Army first, then search and rescue." He fashioned a splint for her wrist using a wooden spoon and strips of gauze. "This'll have to do until we can get you proper care." "I told you I'm leaving. Ma'am, you can barely stand. River water's full of bacteria. You need antibiotics and rest." Maya's jaw set stubbornly. "I can manage." "Like you managed last night?" His tone softened at her glare. "Look, at least let me make you some tea." He reached for a tin on a high shelf, and a photo fluttered to the floor. Maya caught a glimpse of a young girl's smile before Eli snatched it up, his face tight with pain. "Laurel," he said quietly, tucking the photo away. "My daughter." The word hung heavy in the air. Maya recognized the weight of loss in his voice. She carried enough of her own. Through the afternoon, they settled into an uneasy rhythm. Eli brought her soup, helped her sit up, checked her temperature. His movements were efficient but careful, respecting her space while ensuring her needs were met. "I should call the sheriff," he said finally, holding his cell phone. "Report what happened." Maya's heart jumped. "No, please." Eli studied her face, seeing the fear she tried to hide. He remembered the marks on her arms that weren't from the river, the way she startled at sudden movements. His thumb hovered over the phone's keypad. Then he slipped the phone back in his pocket. The sheriff's department was small, word traveled fast, and he'd seen enough domestic cases to know how family connections could twist justice. Whatever had sent her into that river, she needed safety first. "Rest," he said instead. We'll figure it out tomorrow." Maya closed her eyes, exhaustion and relief warring in her chest. For now, in this stranger's cabin, she allowed herself to feel something close to safe. At dawn, Eli studied Maya's sleeping form on the floor and began adapting his cabin with quiet efficiency. The morning light filtered through dusty windows, casting long shadows across the worn wooden planks. He pulled lumber from his workshop shed, carefully selecting pieces that wouldn't splinter, measuring twice before cutting sturdy planks for a transfer bench. The familiar rhythm of sawing and sanding filled the morning air, punctuated only by the occasional call of birds awakening in the surrounding trees. His hands, weathered and calloused from years of work, moved with purpose as he shaped the wood. Every cut was deliberate, every measurement precise. He'd built many things in his life, but this bench felt different. It mattered more somehow. Inside, Maya stirred at the sounds. She watched through half-closed eyes as Eli rigged a simple pulley system near the cot, testing the rope's strength with his own weight. The ropes creaked softly under his frame as he adjusted the knots and checked the ceiling anchors 3 times to ensure they wouldn't fail. "Morning," he said, noticing her awake, his voice low and gentle in the quiet cabin. "Built you something." He demonstrated the bench, showing how it could slide her from floor to cot without requiring her to put weight on her legs. When Maya's face flushed with embarrassment, a pink tinge spreading across her cheeks, he turned away without comment, giving her privacy while keeping close enough to spot if needed. His movements were natural, as if helping her was the most ordinary thing in the world. "Porridge is warm on the stove," he said casually, busying himself with straightening tools on the far wall. "Put some honey in it. Found it at the back of the cupboard." Later, seeing her shoulders tense from lying still too long, he offered a gentle back scratch through her shirt, his touch careful and grandfatherly. His fingers moved in small circles between her shoulder blades, easing the knots of tension without making her feel helpless. Miles away at the compound, Lori Whitefeather's SUV kicked up dust as she arrived, her face a mask of theatrical concern. The vehicle gleamed in the sunlight, too clean for the dusty roads, much like Lori herself seemed out of place among the weathered buildings. "She's gone!" she called to the gathered relatives, her voice pitched perfectly to carry across the yard. "We have to call the sheriff." Her fingers shook as she dialed, just enough tremor to be noticed by those watching closely. "Yes, Sheriff Whitcomb? My sister Maya, she's missing. We're so worried." Her voice wavered with what sounded like concern, but her eyes remained dry and calculating. In her office, Sheriff Ann Whitcomb jotted notes while listening to Lori's breathless account. 20 years of law enforcement had taught her to read between lines, to hear what wasn't being said. The morning sunlight streamed through her blinds, illuminating the dust particles floating in the air. Much like the half-truths floating in Lori's carefully constructed story. "And when exactly did you last see Maya?" Anne asked, pen poised over her notepad, her voice neutral but attentive. "At dinner, she was—" Lori paused delicately, as if choosing her words with great care. "Well, she'd been drinking. You know how she gets?" Anne's eyebrow lifted slightly, the only indication of her skepticism. "I've never known Maya Whitefeather to drink." "Oh, it's a recent thing, since the accident." Lori's voice dripped concern, honey-sweet and just as sticky. "She's been so unstable lately, paranoid, making accusations. We've all been so worried about her state of mind." Down on Elm Street, the gossip machine was already churning at full speed. Mrs. Peterson told the grocery clerk that Maya had another episode while selecting perfectly red apples and placing them in her basket one by one. At the diner, someone mentioned seeing her truck still parked at the compound, The comment passed between coffee refills and orders of scrambled eggs. "Probably wandered off again," said the waitress, shaking her head as she wiped down a table with practiced circular motions. "Poor thing's never been right since that fall years ago. My cousin works at the hospital, you know, and she said—" Sheriff Ann walked the compound grounds methodically, her trained eyes missing nothing. She noted the mud-slicked path to the river, fresh scuff marks on the back steps, a torn piece of fabric caught on a branch. She interviewed neighbors with careful neutrality, filing away their nervous glances toward the main house, the way they shifted their weight when certain questions were asked. "Anything unusual last night?" she asked old Joe Martinez, whose property backed onto the compound. His weathered face crinkled as he considered the question, fingers tapping against his walking cane. "Heard voices raised," he admitted finally, looking toward the horizon rather than meeting her eyes. "But that family, they always got something brewing." Back at the cabin, the afternoon sun slanted through dusty windows as Maya finally spoke her name to Eli. Her voice was quiet but steady, like a stream that has found its path after a storm. "They pushed me," she said simply, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the blanket covering her legs. "Into the river. I heard them planning it yesterday, but I didn't—" She stopped, hands twisting in the blanket, knuckles turning white with the pressure. "I didn't think they'd really do it." Eli sat on a wooden stool, saying nothing, letting her words find their way out. The only sound was the gentle ticking of the old clock on the mantel and the distant call of a hawk outside. "My sister, half-sister. She wants the land. Grandmother Estella left it to me, but Lori thinks—" Maya's voice caught, a small tremor betraying her composure. "She thinks I'm not fit to manage it. Because of this." She gestured to her legs, the movement sharp with frustration and long-held pain. Eli nodded slowly, understanding deepening in his eyes. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture he'd seen before. Greed disguised as concern, cruelty masked as care. "That's why you don't want the sheriff called. The family has connections. They'll twist it, make me sound crazy." Her eyes met his, dark and intense, holding a lifetime of being dismissed and disbelieved. "They've done it before." Eli stood, decision made. The floorboards creaked under his weight as he crossed to the corner where his jacket hung. He pulled out his phone but didn't dial emergency services. Instead, he punched in a different number, his weathered thumb pressing each button with deliberate pressure. "Tomas, it's Eli Mercer. Remember that favor you owe me?" He glanced at Maya, noting the wariness and hope battling in her expression. "I need your help, quietly. Bring your therapy gear, and don't tell anyone you're coming." He hung up and turned to Maya, his posture relaxed but his eyes serious. "Tomas Ruiz. Good man. Trained physical therapist. Works with the clinic sometimes. He knows how to keep secrets, and he's got hands that can work miracles with muscles that don't want to behave." Maya's shoulders relaxed slightly, the tension easing from her frame as she accepted this small extension of trust. Outside, the afternoon light softened toward evening, golden rays filtering through the trees and casting dappled patterns on the cabin walls. While in town, Sheriff Ann Whitcomb added another careful note to her growing file, her methodical mind slowly piecing together a puzzle that didn't match the picture Lori was trying to paint. Dawn light filtered through pine branches as Eli methodically prepared the flatbed of his pickup. He'd spent hours rigging a makeshift transport system, 2x4s laid flat, covered with foam padding and secured with ratchet straps. A borrowed aluminum folding ramp leaned against the tailgate. "It ain't pretty," he told Maya, "but it'll get us down safe." Maya sat in the cabin doorway, watching him work. Her throat tightened at the careful preparations. You don't have to do all this." "Sure I do." He tested the straps again. "Got Joe Martinez's boy meeting us at the bottom with a hand truck. Quiet kid. Won't talk." The shame burned hot in Maya's chest. All these arrangements, just because she couldn't walk right. But beneath the shame, pain pulsed in her hip, a warning she couldn't ignore. "Ready?" Eli asked softly. Maya nodded, swallowing pride like bitter medicine. Eli's hands were steady as he helped her onto the flatbed, securing her with padded straps. The morning air bit cold through her jacket. They started down the mountain switchbacks, Eli driving slow, checking his mirror every few seconds. The sun climbed higher, throwing sharp shadows across the road. Maya watched treetops sway below, trying to focus on anything but her helplessness. The black SUV appeared suddenly behind them, high beams flashing. Maya's heart jumped. "Eli," she started. "I see it." His knuckles whitened on the wheel. The road narrowed, hugging the mountain face. The SUV crept closer, engine revving. When Eli slowed at a sharp turn, the larger vehicle lurched forward, trying to squeeze past. Metal screamed against metal as the SUV clipped their trailer. The pickup lurched towards the edge. Maya grabbed the side rails, straps digging into her chest. "Hold on!" Eli shouted, wrestling the wheel. A red sedan appeared around the bend. The SUV swerved, tires squealing. Everything happened at once. The sedan braking hard, the SUV clipping its front end, a man stumbling out onto the road. Then came the sharp crack of gunfire. The man from the sedan crumpled, a look of stunned surprise on his face. Blood bloomed on his shirt. "Oh God," Maya breathed. "Oh God, no." Tires crunched on gravel as vehicles stopped. A farmhand on a morning coffee run stood frozen, phone raised. Someone shoved him roughly aside. The SUV's door opened. Lori stepped out, face arranged in perfect horror. "Maya, what are you doing? We've been so worried." Her voice carried for any witnesses. "Why would you run away like this?" "You pushed me in the river." Maya's words echoed off the cliff face. "She's confused," Lori told the gathering crowd. "She has these episodes." Sheriff Ann's cruiser appeared, lights flashing. She took in the scene with sharp eyes, the wounded man being tended by Eli, the dented vehicles, Maya strapped to the flatbed, the farmhand still gripping his phone. "Everyone stay where you are," she commanded, voice cutting through the chaos. She pointed to two deputies. "Separate statements, now." She guided Eli and Maya to her cruiser, positioning it to block Lori's view. "Start from the beginning," she said quietly. Notebook ready. Behind them, paramedics rushed to the fallen man. The morning sun climbed higher, illuminating the mountain's scarred face and the scattered evidence of violence below. Sheriff Ann's office felt too small for all the tension it held. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the worn desk as she studied her notepad, jaw tight with concentration. The faint ticking of the wall clock punctuated the silence between questions, each second a reminder of how crucial this investigation had become. "Walk me through it again, Mr. Mercer," she said, her tone professional but tinged with urgency. Eli sat straight-backed in the metal chair, his weathered hands resting on his knees. The chair creaked slightly as he shifted his weight. "Found her in the river 4 nights ago. Hypothermic. Blue-lipped and barely conscious. Brought her to my cabin for medical care. I'm trained as a medic from my ranger days. Was transporting her to town this morning when that black SUV came up behind us, tailing us for at least 3 miles before making a move." "And the collision?" Anne's pen hovered over her notepad, ready to capture every detail. "They tried passing on a blind curve, clipped us deliberately." His voice stayed steady, but his hands clenched until the knuckles whitened. "Driver knew exactly what they were doing. Wasn't no accident. They aimed right for the passenger side where Maya was sitting." In the next room, Maya sat wrapped in a borrowed blanket, the rough fabric scratching against her skin. Her silence felt heavy as lead, weighing down the air around her. The bruises on her arms had darkened to a deep purple, visual testimony to what she'd endured. Sheriff Ann had separated them immediately, standard procedure, but Maya's eyes kept drifting to the door, dividing them from Eli, as if drawing strength from knowing he was nearby. "I need to know what happened at the compound," Ann pressed gently, leaning forward slightly. The fluorescent light glinted off her badge. "Whatever you can tell me will help us protect you." Maya's fingers traced the edge of her blanket, following the pattern of stitches one by one. "I can't. Not yet." Fear of what her family might do next made her throat tight, constricting each word. The memory of hands pushing her into the river flashed vividly, making her flinch. The station's front door chimed, the sound cutting through the tense quiet. Lori swept in, perfectly composed in a cream blazer that looked freshly pressed despite the morning's chaos. Her hair fell in carefully arranged waves, not a strand out of place. 2 deputies flanked her as she gave her statement, voice carrying through the thin walls, each word precise and practiced. "I was trying to help my poor sister." Lori's voice dripped concern, theatrical in its intensity. "She's been unstable lately, wandering off, talking about spirits and visions. That man kidnapped her from our property while she was vulnerable. We were just trying to bring her home safely when he caused that terrible accident. My cousin Peter was only trying to help." Sheriff Ann's pen scratched steadily across the paper, noting every contradiction, every inconsistency in timing and detail. The timeline didn't match the medical evidence. The injuries didn't match a simple wandering-off story. And that farmhand's phone with its damning video footage told yet another version entirely. "I'm ordering medical evaluations," she announced, standing with decisive authority. "For everyone involved. Full documentation of injuries, timelines, and forensic evidence." Her tone left no room for argument, even as Lori's perfect smile faltered slightly. At the county hospital, organized chaos reigned. Nurses hurried between rooms, monitors beeped insistently, and the antiseptic smell hung heavy in the corridors. The accident victim, identified as Peter Martinez, age 42, lay stabilized in the trauma unit, tubes and wires connecting him to various machines. "Severe shock and blood loss," a nurse reported, checking his vitals. "Laceration to the femoral artery, but he'll pull through. Doctors already taken his statement." Tomas Ruiz arrived quietly through a side entrance, medical bag in hand, his footsteps barely audible on the polished floor. His face showed professional calm, but concern lingered in his eyes. He found Maya in a curtained exam area, Eli standing guard nearby, his broad shoulders tense as he monitored everyone who passed by. "Let's take a look," Tomas said kindly, helping Maya onto the exam table with practiced gentleness. His warm hands assessed her injuries methodically, the river bruises now layered with fresh ones from the morning's chaos. He noticed how she winced when moving her left arm, the slight hitch in her breathing. "You need proper imaging," he insisted, making notes on her chart, "and at least 24 hours observation. Your previous injuries are aggravated, and there could be internal damage we can't see. We need to document everything, for your health and for the record." Maya started to shake her head, panic flickering in her eyes at the thought of being trapped in the hospital. But Eli stepped closer. The overhead lights cast shadows across his face, highlighting the sincerity in his expression. "Please," he said softly, his voice rough with emotion. "Let them help. I'll be right outside your door the whole time." After a long moment, she nodded, shoulders slumping with exhaustion and surrender. As night fell, the hospital settled into its evening rhythm. Lights dimmed in the corridors, and the staff spoke in hushed tones. Maya dozed fitfully in a private room, monitors beeping steadily beside her bed. Dreams of rushing water and grasping hands made her twitch beneath the thin hospital blanket. Eli refused to leave, dozing in an uncomfortable chair by the door, his chin dropping to his chest only to jerk upward at every passing footstep. Sheriff Ann stationed a deputy in the hall, taking no chances with Maya's safety, the uniformed figure a silent sentinel against further harm. Morning brought a fresh wave of chaos. Reporters clustered around the courthouse steps like hungry vultures, microphones thrust toward anyone who'd talk, cameras flashing in the early light. Lori had given an exclusive interview to local radio host Buck Wesley, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion that carried across car radios throughout the county. "I have proof," she'd claimed, dabbing at dry eyes with a pristine handkerchief. A recorded call where Maya admits to planning this whole thing. She wanted the family property for herself, to sell it off to outsiders. The doctored audio clip spread like wildfire through social media and text messages, slipping from phone to phone faster than truth could follow. Maya's supposed voice, spliced and altered to sound cold and calculating. "I'll make them pay for the property." In her hospital bed, Maya watched the morning news with growing horror, her fingers gripping the remote so tightly her knuckles blanched. The familiar face of her sister-in-law filled the screen, eyes brimming with false tears. But Sheriff Ann appeared in the doorway, expression grimly satisfied, holding a manila folder stamped with the county seal. "That farmhand's phone video?" she said, stepping inside and closing the door firmly behind her. "It shows everything, the attempted drowning clear as day, and our tech team is already analyzing that supposed phone call recording." She smiled thinly, eyes sharp with determination. Amazing what digital forensics can tell us about edited audio these days. The splicing points are already flagged. The morning sun slanted through hospital blinds, painting stripes across Maya's blanket like prison bars that were finally beginning to crack. One night had passed since the mountain road chaos. The hospital room felt like the first truly safe space she'd known in days. She touched her bruised wrist, feeling the pulse of truth beneath her skin, steady and insistent. Finally, she was ready to tell her full story, the words rising in her throat like prayer. Morning light filtered through the hospital blinds as Dr. Chen studied Maya's CT scans, her experienced fingers tracing the illuminated images on the light box. The doctor's face remained composed, professional, though her eyes softened with concern. "No new spinal fractures," she explained, pointing to the specific vertebrae on the images. "But there's significant soft tissue trauma here and here." Her finger traced dark patches on the scan that bloomed like storm clouds across Maya's back and side. The impact caused deep bruising and muscle strain, but fortunately nothing that should cause permanent damage. Maya winced as the nurse cleaned a raw wound on her side, where skin had been scraped against the rough asphalt. The area was warm and tender to the touch, the edges already showing the angry red halo of early infection. Small beads of yellowish discharge collected at the corner of the wound. "We'll start you on antibiotics," the nurse said, her movements gentle but efficient, as she applied fresh gauze with practiced hands. "Both oral and topical treatment. The pills will fight infection from the inside, while this ointment works directly on the wound site. You'll need to keep it clean and dry." Tomas arrived shortly after with his therapy kit, the familiar blue duffel bag bulging with equipment. He sat up beside the bed, arranging several soft cushions and elastic bands within easy reach. His presence filled the sterile room with calm reassurance. "Ready to start some gentle movements?" His smile was encouraging as he demonstrated a breathing exercise, his own chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. "Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 2, then release slowly. This helps reduce muscle tension and gets oxygen flowing to those injured tissues. It might seem small, but it's where healing begins. Maya followed his lead, feeling the stretch in her ribs with each careful breath. The pain was there, sharp and insistent, but beneath it, she could sense her body's quiet determination to heal. They moved on to careful lateral transfers, Tomas's hands steady and professional as he guided her through the motions of shifting weight from one side to another. "You're doing great," he murmured, adjusting the position of her arm. "Remember to use your core muscles to support your spine." "Now for some isometric work," he explained, positioning her legs with firm gentleness. "Contract these muscles for 5 seconds, then release. This maintains strength without straining the injured areas. Think of it as keeping the foundation strong while the house is under repair." Down in the hospital lobby, camera flashes lit up Lori's perfectly composed face, like lightning strikes against her porcelain complexion. She stood at a podium draped with the hospital's logo, clutching a delicate white tissue that remained suspiciously dry despite her trembling voice. A small crowd of reporters leaned forward, microphones extended like hungry mouths. "Our family is deeply concerned for Maya's well-being," she announced, voice wavering with precisely measured emotion. "Her instability has been worrying us for months. We've tried reaching out countless times." A theatrical pause as she dabbed at the corner of her eye. If only she'd accepted our help sooner, before that man took advantage. Sheriff Ann watched the performance from her office, jaw tight with growing anger. On her computer screen, the doctored audio clip played again. Maya's voice, choppy and artificial, supposedly plotting revenge against family members. The unnatural pauses and shifts in tone were subtle, but unmistakable to a trained ear. "Send this to digital forensics immediately," she instructed Deputy Rodriguez, sliding a flash drive across her desk. "We need a full analysis of any manipulation, timestamps, editing software used, voice pattern inconsistencies, everything. I want to know exactly how this was fabricated." The deputy nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I'll mark it urgent. Should take 2 to 3 days for complete results." Late afternoon brought Eli to Maya's room, carrying a worn thermos with a faded National Park logo. His boots scuffed the linoleum as he hesitated in the doorway, his tall frame seeming somehow diminished under the harsh fluorescent lights. "Brought you some soup," he said gruffly, placing the thermos on the side table with calloused hands. "Wild rice and mushroom. Nothing from a can. Made it fresh this morning." He gestured vaguely. "Added some of those medicinal herbs you mentioned once, the ones for healing." Maya's throat tightened at the simple kindness, unexpected warmth spreading through her chest. "Thank you," she managed, the words inadequate for the gesture's meaning. He settled into the visitor's chair, twisting his well-worn hat in his hands, fingers working the brim in nervous circles. "Listen, I'm scared of how this town works, how money talks, how the right last name opens doors." His eyes met hers, clear and determined. "But I want you to know—" He met her eyes directly, holding her gaze with quiet intensity. "I'm not backing down. Whatever you need. Whatever comes next." A knock interrupted them, 3 precise taps against the doorframe. Sarah Martinez, the hospital social worker, entered with a folder of papers tucked against her chest. Her sensible shoes squeaked slightly as she approached. "I'd like to discuss your options," she said, pulling up a chair and arranging her materials with methodical care. "We can file for a protective order immediately. It would legally prevent certain individuals from approaching you." She flipped through her papers. "There's also the possibility of pressing assault charges based on the incident report. The evidence is substantial." She paused, voice softening. "And given the family situation, we could involve Child Protective Services?" "No," Maya said firmly, her voice suddenly stronger than it had been all day. No children involved. The thought of escalating family conflict, of children caught in the crossfire of adult cruelty, made her stomach churn with dread. Some lines couldn't be crossed, even in self-defense. Sarah nodded, acknowledging the boundary without argument, continuing gently. Consider the assault report, though. We have detailed documentation of your injuries, witnesses from the road incident, the sheriff's preliminary findings. She spread several forms on the blanket. These are yours to consider. No pressure for immediate decisions. Maya stared at her hands resting on the hospital blanket, at the IV taped to her skin. The thought of facing her family in court, enduring their stares while she testified about her own humiliation. I need time to think, to be somewhere safe first. 3 days after admission, Dr. Chen signed discharge papers with a flourish of her pen. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching the silver in her short black hair as she reviewed Maya's chart one final time. Your infection's responding well to antibiotics, she noted, tapping the latest lab results. Continue the full course, even if you start feeling better. 10 days, no exceptions. Stopping early could allow resistant bacteria to flourish. Tomas reviewed Maya's therapy plan, demonstrating exercises one final time. His hand supported her arm as she practiced a range of motion technique. I'll visit 3 times a week at the cabin. Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 2 p.m. if that works for you. We'll build on what we started here, gradually increasing intensity as your body heals. Eli waited with his truck in the pickup area, now fitted with secure handrails that gleamed with fresh varnish. Maya felt strange leaving the hospital's safety, a flutter of anxiety rising as the wheelchair approached the exit doors. But as they drove toward the mountains, following winding roads into increasingly remote terrain, she watched the town shrink, behind them in the side mirror. 3 days had passed since the chaos on the road. 3 days of healing, planning, and gathering strength in the quiet moments between medical interventions. The cabin's familiar scent of wood smoke and pine greeted them as Eli helped her from the truck. Maya noticed immediately that he had added more adaptive equipment. Grab bars beside the doorway, a proper transfer bench in the shower, a sturdy ramp leading to the porch with a gentle slope that wouldn't strain her back. Maya touched the smooth wood of the railing, recognizing the care in each modification, each nail and joint crafted specifically for her needs. Welcome back, Eli said simply, his voice gruff with emotion he couldn't quite express. He pushed the door open, revealing the warm interior where a small fire already crackled in the wood stove, ready to ward off the mountain chill and create a sanctuary of warmth and safety. The morning after returning to the cabin, Maya woke to find Tomas already setting up equipment. He'd brought resistance bands, foam blocks, and a lightweight transfer board. We'll start simple, he explained, demonstrating proper transfer technique. Lead with your stronger side, protect your core. His hands were steady as he guided her through the movements. Eli watched from the doorway, taking mental notes. Later that day, he began modifications, widening the bathroom threshold, reinforcing the ramp's handrails with smooth cedar. The sound of his saw became a constant companion. Days fell into a rhythm. Mornings meant exercises, wheelchair orientation, learning to navigate tight spaces, building core strength through careful repetitions. Tomas was patient but firm. Breathe through it, he'd remind Maya when her muscles trembled. Small progress is still progress. By the end of the first week, Eli had transformed the cabin. New grab bars appeared in strategic locations. The kitchen counter was lowered slightly. A pulley system emerged above the bed. Here's how it works, he demonstrated one morning, showing Maya how to grip the handles. Use your upper body strength to help with standing transfers. His hands hovered nearby, ready to catch but not interfere. The evening of day 9 brought a crisis. Maya woke from a nap with searing pain down her left side. Her breath came in sharp gasps. "I can't," she choked out. "It hurts too much." Eli sat beside her, voice steady. "Focus on my breathing. Match it." He didn't offer empty comfort or unwanted touch, just quiet presence, until the worst passed. That weekend, Sarah Miller's young daughter Katie appeared at the door clutching a still warm apple pie. "I made you something," she announced, presenting Maya with a braided friendship bracelet in turquoise and white. "Mom says you're getting stronger." Maya's throat tightened as she tied the bracelet around her wrist. Such simple kindness felt like water in a desert. But in town, tensions grew. Lori's doctored audio clip played at the Bluebird Diner, at church socials, in worried whispers. "She's always been unstable," someone would say. "Remember that incident years ago?" At the town council meeting, Sheriff Ann stood firm. "We're investigating all aspects of recent events," she stated. "Until then, I ask everyone to avoid spreading unverified claims." But damage was done. The Martinez family, who'd helped tend Maya's herb garden for years, drove past the compound without stopping. The Hendersons crossed the street when Eli bought supplies. Still, Maya found strength in small victories, making tea without help, successfully transferring to the porch chair to feel morning sun. Each achievement built confidence. "Look," she told Thomas during the 2-week progress check. "No trembling." She demonstrated a smooth transfer from wheelchair to bed. He grinned. "Excellent control. Your core strength is really improving." That 14th evening, Maya sat with Eli by the wood stove. Something in the quiet seemed to invite truth. "I was an emergency medic," he said suddenly, eyes on the flames. "My daughter Laurel had a severe allergic reaction. I was working, couldn't get there in time." His voice roughened. "She was 12. I've carried that guilt ever since." Maya absorbed his pain in silence. Then she reached for her grandmother's leather-bound book of sayings, finding the page marked with a ribbon. "Grief shared is grief halved," she read in Apache, then English, "but love shared is love doubled." Their eyes met in understanding. No more words were needed as the fire crackled and night deepened around the cabin. The town's whispers turned to action as summer heat pressed down. On Tuesday morning, smoke rose from the county building's east wing. The evidence locker, a cramped room of metal shelves and cardboard boxes, burned hot and fast. Fire Chief Martinez directed his crew with tight efficiency. "Contain it to the source," he ordered. "Watch those chemical cabinets." The blaze left ash-coated walls and melted plastic. Among the destroyed items, the original audio recordings from Maya's case. Aaron Chen, a junior tech who'd been cataloging evidence, stared at the ruins with a knot in his stomach. He'd noticed oddities in the frequency patterns of Lori's recordings, telltale signs of manipulation. That morning, following an uneasy hunch, he'd copied the raw files to an encrypted drive. "Total loss," his supervisor announced, already filling out closure forms. "Mark it as accidental electrical." Aaron said nothing, the thumb drive heavy in his pocket. Up on the mountain, Sarah Miller packed her daughter's bag with shaking hands. Another threatening letter had arrived, this one with photos of Katie's school bus stop. "Remember what you saw that day on the switchback?" the note read. "Forget it." By sunset, Sarah's cabin stood empty. Her neighbor found a hastily scrawled note. "Visiting my sister in Idaho. Don't know when we'll be back." At Eli's cabin, Maya's recovery hit a dangerous setback. The town council meeting had run long, filled with pointed questions about Eli's involvement in the accident. He'd returned distracted, forgetting their wound care routine. By morning, Maya's left side burned, Red streaks spread from under the dressing. Her temperature climbed to 102 degrees. "This needs immediate attention," Tomas said, examining the infection site. The skin was hot, swollen, with concerning drainage. "We're looking at cellulitis, possibly deeper tissue involvement." Eli paced, self-loathing evident in every step. "I should have checked last night. This is my fault." "Stop it," Maya snapped, pain making her voice sharp. "I'm not your responsibility. I'm not your chance to make up for—" She bit off the words, but they hung in the air. "For what?" Eli turned, face tight. "For Laurel? Is that what you think this is?" "Isn't it? You've made yourself my guardian, brought the town's anger down on both of us. Because you won't fight for yourself. You hide up here letting them spread lies." "Enough." Tomas's quiet command cut through their anger. "Maya needs medical attention now. Arguments can wait." The drive to town was silent. At the clinic, Dr. Wilson prescribed IV antibiotics and daily wound monitoring. "She needs to stay here," he explained, "at least until the infection's under control." Maya stared at the institutional walls, shoulders tense. The thought of being vulnerable in town, where Laurie's influence reached everywhere, made her chest tight. Tomas touched her arm gently. "I'll coordinate with the night nurses personally. We'll keep you safe." Eli stood in the doorway, conflict clear on his face. "I'll be right outside," he said finally. "Day and night until you're ready to come home." Maya's eyes filled, but she didn't look at him. "Just go." He stepped back, letting the door close between them. Through the window, she watched him settle into a plastic chair in the hall, head bowed, but shoulders set with stubborn determination. The week's escalating events had left them all raw, exposed. But as evening settled over the clinic, at least they weren't facing it alone. Maya stared at the clinic ceiling, her body burning with fever. The white tiles blurred and shifted in her vision as monitors beeped steadily beside her. Sweat dampened her hospital gown, making it cling uncomfortably to her skin. She tried to lift her arm for the morning stretches Tomas had taught her, but even that small movement sent waves of exhaustion through her muscles. Her breath caught in her throat as pain radiated from her core. Outside her window, Main Street hummed with everyday life. People walked briskly along the sidewalks, stopping to chat or ducking into the bakery, where the scent of fresh bread wafted into the street. Inside, she felt trapped, not just by her body's weakness, but by fear of what Laurie might do next. The thought of her cousin's smiling face, with those cold, calculating eyes behind it, made Maya's heart race faster than the fever warranted. Tomas arrived for his morning check, his smile gentle but concerned. The leather of his worn medical bag creaked as he set it down beside her bed. "Let's skip exercises today," he said, noting her temperature, 103.2. He made a note on her chart, his handwriting neat and precise. "Focus on rest and letting the antibiotics do their work. Your body needs time to heal." While reviewing her chart, his brow furrowed, creating deep lines across his forehead. He flipped back and forth between pages, checking dates. "Something's not adding up here," he muttered, comparing dates and making small marks with his pen. "The timeline Laurie gave about finding the compound empty. It doesn't match the neighbor's account." He glanced at Maya, then back at the chart, his lips pressed into a thin line of concern. Down at the sheriff's office, Ann Whitcomb's phone buzzed against the wooden surface of her desk, interrupting her review of case files. She picked it up, coffee mug in her other hand, and read the message. A text from an unknown number. "I have video from the Mountain Road incident, uploaded before they took my phone." Anne set down her mug so quickly coffee sloshed over the rim. It was Carlos, the farmhand who'd witnessed the ambush. His hands had shaken as he'd filmed Laurie's SUV forcing Eli's truck against the guardrail, but his camera had caught it all. The deliberate swerve, the moment of impact, the way Laurie had slowed down to watch before speeding away. Anne's heart quickened as she tapped the link, knowing this could be the evidence they desperately needed. Eli spent that first day in the hallway chair, watching nurses come and go through the sterile corridor. His back ached from the hard plastic, but he wouldn't leave. He counted the ceiling tiles, memorized the shift changes, and nodded politely to staff who passed by with sympathetic glances. Around midnight, Dr. Wilson emerged from Maya's room, his white coat rumpled from the long day. "The fever's holding steady," he reported, removing his glasses to rub tired eyes. "But she's fighting. There's strength in her I don't often see." He placed a reassuring hand on Eli's shoulder. Eli nodded, throat tight with emotion he couldn't express. He thought about his cabin up the mountain, the quiet life he'd built there after Laurel, the peaceful solitude of mornings with only bird song and wind through pine needles. Maybe it would be easier to go back to that solitude, let someone else fight this battle. Someone without a history of failure when others needed him most. But then he remembered Maya's face when he'd pulled her from the river, that mix of terror and fierce determination. The way her eyes had locked onto his, trusting him despite everything. He couldn't walk away. Not this time. Not from her. On the second day, Eli tracked down Carlos at his sister's house outside town. The small adobe home sat at the end of a dusty road, chickens pecking in the yard. The farmhand was packing his truck, throwing duffel bags into the bed with nervous glances toward the road, planning to leave before anyone connected him to the video. "I understand being scared," Eli said quietly, standing by the truck's tailgate. "But you saw what happened. You have proof. Without your testimony, they might get away with it again." Carlos gripped his keys until his knuckles turned white. "They'll come after my family. My sister has kids." Fear made his voice crack slightly. "Sheriff Ann can protect you. I'll help too. My cabin's off-grid. Plenty of room if you need somewhere to lay low." Eli pulled out a piece of paper with directions. "No one finds that place unless I want them to." In Maya's room, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the linoleum floor as she pulled herself up against the pillows. Each movement was deliberate, calculated to minimize pain. Her hands shook as she picked up the pen and paper a nurse had brought, the simple weight of it almost too much for her weakened grip. "Dear Judge Martinez," she began. The words came slowly at first, her handwriting uneven and shaky, then faster as she described the years of harassment, the compound incident, the river, the stolen land, the threats, the manipulation of evidence. She wrote until her hand cramped, until the pen left indentations in her fingers. Then she started a second letter on fresh paper. "Grandmother Estella, I hear your voice in my dreams. You taught me to stand tall, even when others try to make me small." The words flowed more easily now, intimate and raw. She wrote of pain and healing, of connection to the land that sustained generations before her. That night, while the hospital slept in half-darkness, monitors glowing like fireflies in the dim rooms, Maya whispered the words she would need for court. Not just accusations, but truth, about family, about justice, about healing, about the sacredness of land and memory. She spoke them into the darkness until they felt right, until they became part of her. Each whispered practice made her voice stronger, more certain. The third morning brought a breakthrough. Aaron, the lab tech with the nervous smile and quiet determination, left an envelope in Anne's mailbox. He'd worked through the night, risking his job at the county office. Inside, a thumb drive with the original audio files, showing clear signs of tampering. The waveforms revealed digital splicing that someone had tried to hide. "I can testify about the technical markers of manipulation," his note read in careful block letters. "It's time someone stood up to them. My grandfather taught me better than to stay silent." Anne moved quickly, securing a court order to officially enter the backup files as evidence. She worked methodically, crossing every T, dotting every I, ensuring the chain of custody remained unbroken. By afternoon, Carlos had agreed to testify about the Mountain Road attack, his sister nodding in solemn support beside him. Eli was dozing in his hallway chair, head tipped back against the wall, when Anne touched his shoulder. He startled awake, instantly alert. "We have proof," she said softly, mindful of the quiet hospital corridor. "Real proof that can't be burned or buried, the kind that makes a difference." In Maya's room, her fever had finally broken. The sheet beneath her was damp with sweat, but her eyes were clear for the first time in days. When Eli told her about the witnesses coming forward, about the evidence mounting like a wall against Laurie's lies, she pressed her palms to her eyes, shoulders shaking with relief. Tears slipped through her fingers. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse but steady. "For not giving up, for believing me when no one else would." "Never," he answered, and meant it with every fiber of his being. In that moment, he made a silent promise to himself and to her, that this time he wouldn't fail someone who needed him. That this time, justice would prevail. David Chen from the legal aid clinic arrived carrying a weathered briefcase and a kind smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. His gray suit was neat but worn at the elbows, and his careful way of arranging papers showed years of experience with delicate cases. "We'll take this step by step," he explained, pulling up a chair beside Maya's hospital bed. "First, let's review what happens when you enter the courtroom." Maya nodded, gripping her pen tightly as she took notes. David walked her through each detail, where she would sit, how to address the judge, when to pause for objections. "Remember," he said, "speak clearly and stay focused on the facts. Your truth is your strongest weapon." Across town, in his small office lined with law books, Laurie's attorney Marcus Wells paced as he barked into his phone. "Those backup files could be manipulated too. We need to question the chain of custody." Tomas arrived each afternoon, helping Maya strengthen her voice. "Breathe from your diaphragm," he instructed, placing a hand gently on her stomach. "Like this. Feel how it fills completely?" They practiced for hours, breathing exercises, vocal warm-ups, techniques to manage anxiety. Maya's voice grew steadier each day. "Now try the full statement again," Tomas encouraged. "Remember to pause between sections." Sheriff Ann worked methodically, setting up a network of safe houses and escort schedules. She arranged for Carlos to stay at a friend's ranch outside town, away from pressure and prying eyes. "We've got officers checking the properties twice daily," she assured Maya during a visit. "And I've filed for emergency restraining orders against your cousins." The paperwork sat heavy on her desk. Incident reports, witness statements, surveillance logs. Anne had seen too many cases crumble from intimidation. Not this time. Aaron, the lab tech, met with David Chen in a quiet coffee shop 2 towns over. His hands shook slightly as he explained the technical markers proving the audio manipulation. "See these waveform patterns?" He pointed to his laptop screen. "The breaks here and here, those aren't natural. Someone spliced different recordings together." Eli spent his days building a wheelchair ramp at his cabin, preparing for Maya's eventual return. The rhythmic sound of hammering helped quiet his thoughts, but anxiety still gnawed at him. One evening, he sat beside Maya's bed, his shoulders hunched. "The last time I testified in court," he said quietly, "it was about Laurel. They questioned everything. My judgment, my timing, my skills as a medic. Said I should have known better. Maya reached for the letter she'd written, her voice soft but steady as she read. Grandmother Estella taught me that healing isn't just about the body. It's about finding your voice again, even when it shakes. About standing with those who stand with you. Eli's eyes grew damp as she continued reading, her words painting pictures of resilience and chosen family. The days fell into a pattern. Morning prep with David, afternoon therapy with Thomas, evening strategy sessions with Sheriff Ann. Maya's strength grew alongside her resolve. 2 weeks into preparations, on a clear evening, Maya asked to go outside. Eli helped navigate her wheelchair through the clinic's back door to a small garden area. Above them, stars pierced the darkness like tiny lights of hope. Maya tilted her head back, feeling the cool air on her face. Her hands trembled slightly on the wheelchair's arms, but her spine was straight. "I'm scared," she admitted softly. "I know," Eli replied, standing quiet beside her. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. Tomorrow would bring more preparation, more challenges. But for now, there was just this moment, the night air, the starlight, and 2 people finding strength in each other's presence. The courthouse steps gleamed in the early morning sun as Sheriff Ann's deputies established a security perimeter. Metal detectors hummed at the entrance while officers checked IDs against the witness list. Maya sat quietly in the adapted van as Eli helped secure her wheelchair. Her dark hair was neatly braided, her clothes pressed and practical. Tomas stood nearby, a thick medical file tucked under his arm, his usually cheerful face serious. "Ready?" Eli asked softly. Maya nodded, her fingers tight around a small cloth bag containing sage and a fragment of Grandmother Estella's prayer book. Inside the courtroom, morning light filtered through tall windows. The wooden benches creaked as people settled. Maya wheeled to her designated spot, aware of the whispers that followed her movement. When called to testify, Maya's voice started low but grew stronger as she spoke. "I was at the compound that evening, preparing herbs in the garden." She described the family gathering, the tension, the veiled threats. Her words painted clear pictures, the shove that sent her stumbling, the shocking cold of the river, the desperate struggle to stay afloat. "The current was strong," she said, her hands gripping the wheelchair arms. "I could taste mud and leaves. Everything was dark except when lightning flashed." The courtroom stayed silent as she recounted Eli's rescue, the recovery at his cabin, and the terrifying ambush on the mountain road. Medical terms peppered her testimony as she detailed her injuries, soft tissue damage, infection, mobility limitations. Lori took the stand next, perfectly composed in a conservative blue dress. Her performance was practiced, each word carefully chosen. "Maya has always been dramatic," Lori said, her voice dripping with false concern. "After her first accident, she became paranoid, imagining threats everywhere." But Aaron's testimony cut through the manipulation. The young lab tech nervously adjusted his glasses as he explained the technical evidence. "The audio file shows clear signs of splicing," he said, pointing to projected waveforms. "These markers here and here, they're digital fingerprints of editing. Someone cut and rearranged parts of the original recording." The farmhand's video footage played next. The grainy phone recording showed the black SUV's aggressive maneuvers on the mountain road, the attempted pass, the collision. The judge, a stern woman with steel-gray hair, reviewed the evidence carefully. Her ruling was measured but firm. Sufficient probable cause existed. She ordered Lori's cousins held pending further investigation. "This court takes attempted harm and witness intimidation very seriously," she stated, her gaze sweeping the room. The next morning, a small crowd gathered outside the courthouse. Some held handmade signs supporting Maya. "Justice for Maya," read one in careful letters. Others clustered in corners, muttering darkly about family loyalty and outsiders causing trouble. A few older women glared and whispered behind their hands as Maya arrived for a follow-up meeting with her attorney. In a quiet courthouse corridor, away from prying eyes, Eli and Maya paused. Without words, he reached for her hand. Their fingers intertwined, a simple gesture that spoke volumes about trust and solidarity. Maya's eyes met his, and for a moment they stayed still, drawing strength from each other's presence. The morning sun streamed through a high window, warming their joined hands. The building hummed with activity around them, phones ringing, doors opening and closing, footsteps on marble floors. But in that corridor, time seemed to pause, marking a moment when private support became public commitment. Sheriff Ann passed by, nodding slightly in acknowledgement. She carried a thick folder of new depositions, her steady stride speaking of work still to come. But for now, in this moment, Maya and Eli stood together, facing whatever would come next. The acrid smell of smoke still lingered in the evidence locker on Monday morning, 5 days after the fire. The arson investigator, Marcus Chen, crouched beside the charred metal cabinets, his flashlight beam cutting through the dim space. "Accelerant was used here," he said, pointing to a dark stain pattern. "And here. Professional job. They knew exactly which section to target." Sheriff Ann stood behind him, her notebook open. Burned manila envelopes crumbled at the edges, their contents reduced to ash. The damage was precise, concentrated around where the original audio recordings had been stored. "They didn't want anything else touched," she noted. "Just the evidence from Maya's case." That afternoon, Aaron sat in the sheriff's office, his leg bouncing nervously as he pulled a small thumb drive from his pocket. "I made the backup the day it came in," he explained, voice barely above a whisper. "Something felt wrong about how fast they wanted to process it." The encrypted files took hours to unlock, even with the court order. Sheriff Ann watched the progress bar crawl across her computer screen while Aaron kept glancing at the door. Tuesday brought the first attempt to discredit him. Lori's defense attorney, James Morton, filed a motion claiming Aaron had personal bias against the family. He cited a distant cousin who'd once dated Maya, trying to establish a conflict of interest. "It's nonsense," Aaron insisted, his hands shaking as he read the motion. "I've never even met Maya. I just knew the audio was tampered with." Wednesday night, the farmhand called Sheriff Ann in a panic. His voice crackled over the radio. "They're outside my barn, 2 of them. I can see their truck." The standoff lasted nearly an hour. Sheriff Ann found Lori's cousins, Brad and Marcus Whitefeather, lurking near the farmhand's property. Their excuses about checking fences fell apart under questioning. "You're both in violation of the restraining order," she said firmly, handcuffing Brad while her deputy secured Marcus. "Witness intimidation is a felony." Thursday brought Maya's setback during therapy. Tomas was helping her practice a new transfer technique when she twisted wrong. The partially healed wound along her side tore slightly, bringing tears of pain and frustration to her eyes. "I can't," she gasped, as Eli helped ease her onto the bed. "I can't keep doing this." Eli sat beside her through the night, changing cold compresses and murmuring quiet encouragement. Near dawn, he noticed she'd finally fallen into an exhausted sleep, her hand still gripping his. Friday morning, Aaron arrived at the sheriff's office with the fully decrypted files. The original audio revealed Lori coaching her cousins, planning the ambush on the mountain road. The unedited dashcam footage from a passing patrol car showed the SUV's deliberate swerve toward Eli's truck. "This is what they tried to burn," Sheriff Ann said, carefully copying the files. This is what they were afraid of. Through the weekend, she prepared the evidence for court, organizing timestamps and chain of custody documents. Each file told part of a larger story, one of calculated harm and careful cover-ups. By Sunday evening, the new evidence was secured in a reinforced safe at the courthouse, with additional security measures in place. Sheriff Ann had stationed deputies on rotating shifts, determined not to let this proof be destroyed. The week had brought both setbacks and breakthroughs. Maya's physical wound might have reopened, but the truth was finally emerging from its own dark places, like spring water finding its way through stone. Sheriff Ann sealed the last envelope, labeled it carefully, and locked it away. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight the evidence was safe, and with it, the chance for justice that Maya had fought so hard to find. The county courthouse hummed with tension on Monday morning. Reporters clustered near the entrance, their cameras capturing Maya as Eli wheeled her carefully up the accessibility ramp. Inside the anteroom, Tomas knelt beside her chair. "Remember your breathing," he said softly. 4 counts in, hold for 2, 6 counts out, just like we practiced. Maya closed her eyes, following his gentle coaching. Her hands trembled slightly on the armrests, but her spine remained straight, her chin lifted with quiet dignity. The courtroom filled quickly. Sheriff Ann stood near the bailiff, watching as Lori swept in wearing a modest navy dress, her expression carefully composed. Aaron sat nervously in the front row, clutching his laptop case. The farmhand, Jim Torres, twisted his hat in his hands 3 rows back. Judge Martinez called the hearing to order at 9 o'clock sharp. The state's attorney presented the evidence methodically, starting with Aaron's testimony about the audio files. On the courtroom screens, waveform patterns showed clear signs of splicing and manipulation. "These peaks here," Aaron explained, pointing with a laser, "show where original content was removed and replaced. The metadata confirms the edit dates." The farmhand's dashcam footage played next. The grainy video clearly showed Lori's SUV swerving toward Eli's truck on the mountain road, followed by the horrifying moment of impact. A collective gasp rose from the gallery. When the defense attorney rose to cross-examine Eli about his past, Maya felt her chest tighten. But Eli's testimony was steady and direct. "Yes, my daughter Laurel died under my care," he said quietly. "I was cleared of wrongdoing, but I've carried that grief every day since. It taught me to recognize when someone needs protection." Several jurors nodded, moved by his honesty. Even Judge Martinez's stern expression softened momentarily. Day 2. The ruling Tuesday morning brought heavy rain and darker skies. The courthouse corridors were hushed as people filed in for the judge's ruling on probable cause. Judge Martinez's voice filled the silent courtroom. "Based on the preponderance of evidence presented, this court finds sufficient probable cause to proceed with formal indictments against Lorena Whitefeather and co-defendants Bradley and Marcus Whitefeather for charges including attempted assault, conspiracy, and witness intimidation." Maya released a shaky breath. Beside her, Eli squeezed her shoulder gently. Across the aisle, Lori's composed mask finally cracked, showing a flash of genuine fear. Day 3. Community Reckoning. The town hall meeting on Wednesday evening drew nearly 200 people. Mayor Collins opened by acknowledging the community's failure to protect one of their own. Sarah Jensen, who owned the coffee shop, stood first. "I'm ashamed I believed the rumors," she said, voice breaking. "Maya, I should have asked you directly what happened. I'm sorry." Others followed. The hardware store owner who had refused to deliver supplies, the librarian who had avoided Maya's gaze, neighbors who had turned away. Each apology helped rebuild something broken in the fabric of their small town. As the meeting wound down, Eli and Maya slipped away quietly. They drove to her family parcel as the sun began to set. In the bed of Eli's truck sat a young blue spruce sapling, its root ball carefully wrapped. Together they chose a spot near where Maya's herb garden used to grow. Eli dug the hole while Maya measured the depth from her chair, making sure it was just right. As they settled the small tree into its new home, Maya touched one of its soft needles. "Grandmother Estella always said new life brings healing," she murmured. The last rays of sunlight filtered through the spruce's branches, casting gentle shadows on the earth they'd just turned. It wasn't an ending, not yet, but it felt like a beginning. Dr. Sanders reviewed Maya's latest scans in his office, pointing to areas of improvement while being direct about limitations. "The partial paralysis from your previous injury remains permanent," he explained. "But your core strength has improved significantly with therapy. We're seeing better stability in your transfers." Tomas nodded from his seat beside Maya. "The aquatherapy is helping too. Range of motion in both legs is up 20%. At the county meeting that Thursday, the commissioners discussed restitution arrangements. Maya sat quietly as figures were proposed for property damage and medical costs. The legal wheels turned slowly. Lori and her cousins were arraigned, entered initial pleas, and their trial dates were set for the following spring. Week 2. The transformation of Maya's land began with a volunteer crew clearing brush and debris. Eli supervised from dawn to dusk, marking safe paths with bright flags and ensuring proper drainage away from the foundation. "Got to think about wheelchair access in all weather," he explained to the helpers. Young Trevor from the hardware store donated gravel for the paths, while his father brought a small excavator to level the ground. Maya worked. From her chair, directing placement of raised garden beds and selecting spots for benches. She insisted on testing every surface herself, making notes about texture and slope. Week 3. The workshop frame rose steadily. Eli installed wider doorways and smooth thresholds, while 2 retired contractors volunteered to help with the ramps. Maya's neighbor Susan brought lunch daily, thick sandwiches and thermoses of coffee for the workers. "My brother uses a chair," Susan explained, showing Maya how she'd designed an adjustable potting bench. "You need the right height for different activities." Week 4. Eli joined the town's woodworking circle, bringing his quiet presence to their Tuesday meetings. He started crafting simple meditation stools for the center, each one unique. Tomas organized a therapy schedule, coordinating with other healthcare workers who offered to volunteer time. Sheriff Ann developed a safety workshop series, focusing on practical self-defense and awareness techniques for people with different abilities. Week 5. The neighbor girl, Katie, arrived with her paints one Saturday morning. She carefully lettered the wooden sign, "Estella Healing Center," in turquoise and earth tones. Maya watched from her chair, smiling at Katie's intense concentration. That afternoon, an elderly veteran named Joe brought a gift, a walking stick carved with spiral patterns. "For balance," he said simply, placing it in Maya's hands. "Both kinds." Week 6. Opening day dawned clear and cool. Tables lined the new paths, laden with pies and casseroles. Katie stood proudly beside Maya, holding the ceremonial scissors nearly as long as she was tall. "Together," Maya said softly, and they cut the ribbon while cameras flashed and applause rippled through the crowd. 3 months later. The autumn sun hung low over the mountains as Maya and Eli sat on the bench he'd crafted, facing the river. The blue spruce sapling swayed gently, supported by its stake. Maya touched the smooth wood of the armrest, thinking about voice, not just speaking, but being heard. About how family could be chosen, could grow from the rocky soil of hard times, about how a single act of reaching out could create ripples of change. She removed a small, flat stone from her pocket, one she'd carried since finding it in Grandmother Estella's things. The initials EW were worn but visible. Leaning forward carefully, she placed it among the sapling's roots. Eli's hand found hers, warm and steady. Together they watched the sun paint the mountains gold, then purple, then deep blue. The river's sound had changed for Maya, no longer a reminder of fear, but a constant song of renewal.